In the winter silence of a world that had never seen true financial power, rumors began to spread. Whispers of a place where fortunes were born from nothing, where gold wasn't mined from the earth, but created through trust. It started as a quiet marvel of human ambition. No one knew it at the time, but this single invention would go on to build empires, trigger wars, create millionaires, and ruin lives. It was called a bank, though, in the beginning. It looked nothing like the institutions we know today. Our story starts centuries ago, long before the glowing screens, credit cards, or digital payments we now take for granted. Back then, wealth lived in the form of metal, heavy, cold, difficult to move. Gold and silver coins rattled in bags, tied to belts. And with every journey, every transaction, came danger, thieves, fraud, and the constant fear of losing everything. And then came a man. Or rather, a kind of man. The goldsmith. He wasn't a king, not a warrior, not even a merchant. He simply worked with gold, shaped it, measured it, and most importantly, guarded it. He owned a strongbox thicker than a castle door, and a vault no thief could crack. People trusted goldsmiths with their most precious belongings, because goldsmiths already lived behind locked doors. At first, it was simple. Travelers left their coins with the goldsmith for safekeeping. In return, they received a paper receipt, nothing more than a written promise that their gold awaited them when they returned. A harmless arrangement, a matter of convenience. But over time, something strange began to happen. People stopped coming back for their gold. They didn't need to. Merchants began accepting the paper receipts themselves as payment. Think about it. One piece of paper was lighter than a bag of coins, easier to hide and much easier to trade. Slowly but surely, the receipts became money. And inside the goldsmith's vault, something unexpected grew. Piles and piles of untouched gold. Wealth that technically belonged to other people, yet sat right there in his possession. The temptation was impossible to ignore. He started to wonder, if people only ever came for a fraction of their gold at any given time, what would happen if he quietly lent out the rest? What harm could it do? He made no announcement. He asked for no permission. It was just a quiet decision that would go on to change the entire world. So he began to lend the gold, but not in the form of actual gold itself. He simply wrote new receipts, promises for gold that, in many cases, wasn't even there. These new receipts flowed into the marketplace like fresh water. Businesses sprang to life. Merchants expanded their fleets. Small villages blossomed into bustling towns. And the goldsmith, now no longer just a keeper of wealth, but a creator of its earned interest on every single loan. He became incredibly rich. Not through mining, not through conquest, but through the power of belief. Your belief, everyone's belief, that the paper he issued meant something. This was the birth of modern banking. But power, once tasted, rarely stops growing. Soon, the goldsmiths transformed into full-fledged bankers. They lent more, issued more, and expanded their reach, weaving an invisible web across the entire economy. Money no longer came from the earth. It came from ink and confidence. Of course, not everyone trusted this new magic. There were whispers in taverns, murmurs in crowded markets. What if everyone asked for their gold back at the same time? What if the promises written on paper far outnumbered the reality locked inside the vaults? Those whispers soon grew into fear. Fear turned into panic. And panic turned into disaster. People stormed the banks, frantically demanding the gold they were promised. But there wasn't enough, not nearly enough. The system collapsed under the weight of its own creation. The first bank runs began scenes of chaos, desperation, and betrayal. Families who thought they were secure lost everything. Fortunes evaporated overnight. The very invention that had created so much prosperity now destroyed it just as quickly. And yet, even through the ruin, a strange truth emerged. The world needed banks. Without them, trade froze. Travel halted. Businesses died. Humanity had built its new economy on trust and could no longer survive without the magic of credit. So, governments stepped in, regulating, organizing, and trying to stabilize the system. Banks spread across continents, rose to enormous power, and began to shape the destinies of entire nations. With this rise came new millionaires, merchants who became magnates, traders who became tycoons, and families whose names became synonymous with global finance. But behind every towering success story stood shadows, crashed markets, broken borrowers, currencies that fell like empires, and ordinary people whose lives were swept away in financial storms they never understood. Now, fast forward, the story stretches right into the present day, into the cards we swipe, the apps we tap, the numbers we send across the world with a flick of a finger, and the gold in the vaults. It barely matters now. Money has become something else, entirely digital, invisible, existing in codes and servers, yet still driven by the exact same force that powered the Goldsmiths' first risky decision: the system we live in, the wealth we chase, the debts we fear. All of it traces back to that one moment when a man realized he could issue more promises than he had gold. A moment of genius, a moment of temptation, a moment of incredible danger. The first bank didn't just change how people stored money, it changed how people thought about money, what it meant, what it could do, what it could create, and what it could destroy. The echoes of that transformation are everywhere around us today. Every time the stock market surges with what seems like irrational optimism, every time it crashes into a pit of panic, every single time you check your balance, not in coins, but in numbers glowing on a screen, you are witnessing the legacy of that ancient vault, that quiet forgery that became the foundation of global finance. Some call it the greatest invention in economic history. Others call it a disaster wrapped in cleverness. But one thing is certain: the world as we know it, its wealth, its wars, its dreams, and its inequalities, was built on the fragile promise of a system that began with one goldsmith and a vault full of untouched coins. A system that made millionaires. A system that ruined lives. A system still powerful enough to shake nations to their core. And as long as trust remains, as long as we all believe the numbers are real, the magic will continue. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the concepts that shape our world. See you next time.